Hey fans, I'm Dustin Davis and welcome to Dolphins Express Report. The Miami Dolphins organization finds itself confronting decisions that will shape the franchise for years to come. Expectations that soared during the offseason have collapsed under the weight of devastating injuries and losses that shouldn't have happened. What appeared sustainable just weeks ago now feels fragile, and the margin for error has vanished entirely. Front office calculations around salary caps, roster building, and long-term competitiveness suddenly carry different stakes. Leadership faces uncomfortable questions about direction, and the answers aren't obvious. Internal friction between present-day urgency and future flexibility has begun pulling the organization in opposing directions. The pathway forward remains unclear, but standing still is no longer an option. Whether through personnel moves, structural changes, or both, Miami must choose between salvaging what remains of this season or accepting a longer rebuild. The clock is already running, and the consequences of waiting too long are mounting. That said, let's check out everything that's been said about Dolphins in the last few hours. But first, can I ask you a quick favor? If you're enjoying the content, just hit that like button. It helps us more than you think. Thank you so much. Speculation about a possible Tyreek Hill trade dominated conversations around the league before everything changed in Week 4. The torn ACL he sustained during Miami's victory that week ended any immediate discussion about his availability and introduced serious questions about what comes next for one of football's most explosive receivers. The injury carries implications that extend beyond this season. At 32 years old, Hill faces major reconstructive surgery and an uncertain timeline for return to elite form. Meanwhile, Miami must navigate a financial landscape made far more complicated by a cap number that looms over every roster decision the front office will make between now and next March. Hill's contract runs through the 2026 season, but the price tag attached to keeping him has become nearly impossible to justify. Next year's projected cap hit sits at $51.8 million, an enormous figure for any player, let alone one recovering from significant knee surgery who will turn 33 before the season begins. That number creates pressure points across the entire roster. Miami already faces substantial financial obligations at other positions, and depth concerns persist throughout the lineup. Something has to give, and the options narrow quickly when examining where meaningful cap relief can be found. According to Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports, people around the league believe Miami will move on from Hill before the new league year opens in March of 2026. Jones reported that sources anticipate a release rather than a trade or restructure, suggesting the relationship may have reached its natural conclusion. Quote, the five-time first-team All-Pro was in the second year of a 3-year contract extension with Miami, and league sources expect the Dolphins to release Hill before the start of the next league year in March of 2026, end quote. Hill's agent, Drew Rosenhaus, told reporters his client plans to come back to Miami and expects to be fully ready for Week 1 action with no limitations. The optimism about his recovery timeline offers some encouragement, but Rosenhaus also acknowledged reality. Continuing the partnership will require reworking the existing deal. When money becomes the primary obstacle, alternative destinations tend to emerge. Hill's preferences may shift depending on how Miami's season unfolds and whether the team can demonstrate it's building toward legitimate contention. If Miami continues struggling and misses the playoffs again, Hill's motivation to remain with the current group will likely diminish. He reportedly explored other situations during last offseason's trade rumors, and nothing about this year's results would discourage him from looking elsewhere again. The challenge is that his market value has changed dramatically. A year ago, teams would have lined up to acquire an elite receiver in his prime. Now, after a major knee injury and with questions about recovery at his age, interested parties will be far more selective, and the compensation Miami might receive would be considerably reduced. Across the league, another front office is watching Miami's collapse closely, and they might be ready to capitalize. That instability has connected Kansas City to multiple running backs in trade speculation, including Miami's Devon Achane. What seemed unlikely in early September has become more realistic as the Dolphins season has unraveled. Achane's name resurfaced in trade discussions after Miami's crushing 27-24 loss to Carolina on Sunday. The Dolphins jumped out to a 17-0 lead that included a 10-yard touchdown run from the second-year back, then surrendered the advantage and fell to 1-5 on the season. Given that trajectory, Kansas City should at minimum explore whether Achane might be available. Miami appears headed toward an offseason reset, and general manager Chris Grier could be open to moving a talented young player whose contract expires after 2026. If Achane has any interest in exploring his options, or if Miami decides a directional change is necessary, trading him now preserves asset value rather than risking losing him for nothing when his deal runs out. Achane's combination of game-breaking speed and reliable hands has made him one of the league's most intriguing backs. He posted career-best numbers last season with 1,499 scrimmage yards and 12 touchdowns, and he's carried that production into this year. Through 5 games, he's accumulated 262 rushing yards and 173 receiving yards with 4 total touchdowns. At his current rate, he's on track to finish with approximately 1,479 scrimmage yards and 14 touchdowns, production that would transform Kansas City's offensive identity. Beyond raw statistics, Kansas City must assess how Achane's pass-catching skills and blitz recognition would integrate into Andy Reid's system. His performance in short yardage situations and pass protection will factor into any evaluation, along with medical clearance and workload sustainability. Veach may need to surrender significant draft capital or roster pieces to complete a deal. If the Chiefs are serious about pursuing Achane, they need to act decisively. Interest will intensify as the deadline approaches and as Miami's losses pile up, potentially driving up the asking price and forcing Kansas City to outbid competitors. Still, if Achane becomes the missing piece that unlocks the offense, the premium price may prove worthwhile, especially if it helps deliver a 4th Lombardi trophy since 2019. Yet Miami's problems run deeper than missing personnel. They're rooted in something far more alarming. 5 games into the season, Miami's roster and fan base are fracturing under poor results and questionable decision-making. What looked like a team capable of competing for the division now resembles a franchise drifting toward a top 5 draft pick, and Sunday's collapse in Charlotte only deepened that despair. Miami's playoff chances are effectively finished. A season that still had time to stabilize has instead tilted toward a rebuilding posture. Mike McDaniel intensified scrutiny of his leadership with a baffling choice in the final moments of the Panthers' loss, a decision that many believe eliminated whatever goodwill remained between him and the fan base. With 1 minute and 10 seconds remaining and trailing by 3 points, Miami faced 4th down. Despite holding all 3 timeouts, McDaniel chose to punt from his own 15-yard line after a costly sack on 3rd down left the Dolphins facing 4th and 17. The decision handed Carolina the ball in manageable field position and placed the outcome in the hands of a defense that had been unable to stop the Panthers throughout the 4th quarter. Carolina capitalized on the opportunity. A defensive breakdown and a penalty on Jack Jones allowed the Panthers to run out the clock and secure victory. The sequence, a sack, a punt, and a decisive penalty, captured a disjointed game plan and poor execution that infuriated supporters. Many Dolphins fans are calling for McDaniel's dismissal, pointing to stagnant play calling and an apparent inability to make adjustments as games slip away. Critics describe his approach as passive and cite Sunday's sequence as proof he cannot reliably manage critical late-game situations. If Miami hopes to salvage any respectability from the season, leadership must change course immediately. Replacing the play caller might be a temporary fix, but supporters argue the organization needs decisive, strategic leadership, not incremental adjustments. After Sunday's performance in Charlotte, doubts about McDaniel's capability to lead at the NFL level have reached a crescendo.
With pressure mounting, one name keeps surfacing as a potential solution to restore order in Miami. Miami's latest defeat in a game they should have won revealed structural issues across roster construction, preparation, and in-game adjustments. Those failures have amplified debate over Mike McDaniel's long-term future as the franchise's head coach. As the organization approaches a potential crossroads, attention has turned to prospective replacements. Among them, Notre Dame's Marcus Freeman stands out as a provocative and increasingly plausible candidate to lead a turnaround. A combination of inconsistent offense, a defense unable to sustain stops, roster limitations, and apparent breakdowns in preparation converged on Sunday to cost the Dolphins a game they were positioned to win. Given that context, many observers now view McDaniel's tenure as potentially short-lived, with the front office possibly making a move before the season concludes. This is speculation, not reporting. Still, Marcus Freeman presents an intriguing profile. a young, energetic coach with proven success at the collegiate level and a track record of rapid program stabilization. Freeman took over Notre Dame's program following Brian Kelly's departure, posted a 9-4 debut season, and ultimately compiled a 36-12 record that culminated in a 2024 appearance in the national championship game. At 39, Freeman would bring relative youth, recruiting-style charisma, and a modern approach that could resonate with Miami's younger players and incoming draft classes. His ability to connect with players, develop talent, and instill discipline could address the Dolphins' current shortcomings in cohesion and preparation. Freeman's strengths, adaptability, player development, and motivational leadership could translate into immediate improvements for Miami. He's demonstrated an aptitude for in-game adjustments and defensive scheming, potential solutions to the issues that have plagued the Dolphins this season. While concerns about the transition from college to the NFL are legitimate, proponents argue his leadership qualities outweigh the risk. If ownership concludes McDaniel cannot stabilize the situation, pursuing a dynamic, ascending coach like Freeman provides a clear directional shift. His passion and demonstrated ability to elevate programs make him an attractive candidate to restore competitiveness and culture in Miami. On the roster side, the front office faces an equally urgent question about filling the void left by their star receiver. Tyreek Hill's likely season-ending injury creates an immediate roster gap opposite Jaylen Waddle, one that has reignited trade speculation across the league. With New Orleans struggling through its own difficult season, Chris Olave's name has surfaced repeatedly as a practical option for teams seeking proven pass-catching ability without heavy long-term commitment. This is more than just idle speculation. Outlets including Pro Football Network have identified Olave among a short list of potential trade candidates, noting both his on-field production and the manageable contract that remains. Miami, in particular, meets several criteria that make Olave an attractive short-term target. Pro Football Network lists the Dolphins among 4 realistic landing spots for Olave, noting that Hill's injury creates immediate need at receiver. PFN points out that Olave, a former first-round pick with approximately a year and a half remaining on his deal, offers a relatively affordable option who could help stabilize a pass-heavy scheme without being asked to shoulder the entire load, since Jaylen Waddle would remain the team's primary receiving threat. PFN's other teams of interest include the Pittsburgh Steelers, New York Giants, and San Francisco 49ers. Still, Miami's situation makes particular sense. They need a starter opposite Waddle, and Olave's route running and contested catchability would fit immediately into the offense. Olave was selected 11th overall in the 2022 draft, but his concussion history is an unavoidable concern. He suffered 1 concussion at Ohio State, 2 during his 2022 rookie season, another in 2023, and 1 more in 2025. 5 documented concussions in total. Those incidents have led evaluators to question whether his availability could be a limiting factor and will significantly influence how much a team is willing to sacrifice to acquire him. Olave remains under contract through 2026 at a price many consider reasonable. At the time of writing, he's appeared in 43 games, with 32 starts, recording 217 receptions for 2,750 yards and 11 touchdowns. The production is legitimate and would represent an immediate upgrade, but availability concerns complicate any long-term commitment. On paper, Miami represents a logical landing spot. The contract structure, the offensive scheme, and the immediate need all align. The ultimate decision will depend on medical evaluations, perceived durability, and whether the Dolphins prioritize short-term stabilization over the concussion-related risk inherent in any trade for Olave. The Miami Dolphins stand at a crossroads that will define their trajectory for years to come, and the decisions ahead carry weight beyond this lost season. Should the Dolphins take a chance on Chris Olave despite his extensive concussion history? Is the talent worth the medical risk? Or would Miami be foolish to trade assets for a receiver whose availability remains a constant question mark? Leave your analysis in the comments. Before you go, hit that like and subscribe button. Be part of our community and stay updated. Let's keep Dolphins strong together. Catch you in the next one.